Hi everyone, welcome to my video. This is for physics and music. We're now going to talk about resonance with percussion instruments and talk about 2D standing waves. So, as you know, we've been kind of stuck on resonance, right? We talked about resonance through just the concept of resonance. We talked about it through pipes, through strings, and the concept of standing waves and resonance actually go far beyond the outreach of the course, of the course itself. So I'm just going to give you a little touch of what it means to do 2D standing waves. They're actually quite mathematically complicated, and they're just, like I said, beyond our course in terms of what we want to cover mathematically, like I said. But I think it is important to recognize that they do exist and some of their benefits specifically to musical instruments. So in this video, I will talk about percussion specifically, how their vibrations send waves within themselves, such as drum heads, and as you can see kind of in the background here, this is actually a violin face, and I'll talk about what those drawings are, and how we can utilize standing waves to be better percussionists. And then, of course, talk about why percussion has that interesting sound. It sounds like noise, right? It doesn't really have a distinct tone to it, so I'll talk about that as well. I guess I'll just go into my, there we go, my objectives here. And then I'll talk a little bit about the piano. Once again, this is, I'm not going to go into the inner workings of any of this. I'm just going to do all surface of all of these topics that I have here. And I'm going to show you a bunch of videos and things to kind of relate to, and that are really kind of cool, of course. So first, I'm going to start off with percussion. I'm just going to pretend that you don't know anything about percussion. So I'm actually going to spend the first part of this video talking about percussion, so that when I talk about 2D waves, you can kind of have the idea of how percussion instruments are used. So the percussion instruments, usually, if you ever see a concert or an orchestra, it's usually all the way in the back. Every ensemble has different types of instruments in the percussion section. Of course, if you watch a live band, usually you just have a drum set itself, but there are, of course, many more instruments to, a percussion section itself. So it's actually the largest family of the instrument family, and I'm only going to give you a few of the instruments, but there's just so many, I can literally spend a whole course on it. Now, they're generally solid. I think all of you are familiar with the instrument called the gong, the big one. I'll show you a picture of it anyway. Actually, you can kind of see it right here. That's made out of one giant piece of metal. Incredibly heavy. And then you have things that are made out of wood, like the marimba or the xylophone, depending on what you're playing. And then you have things that have what are called membranes. It's just a really big word to say, like the drum head. Made out of different things. And you know this through instinct. You don't even need to know physics. Is that all of these types of materials change the way these things are sounded. So I'm going to just take you through a brief percussion demonstration. So I like this video. I'm going to comment over it as we watch it. I think I have my sound on. Sound is on. Sound is on.
This is the vibraphone. Compared to most of the rest of our percussion instruments, there's quite a bit of technology. The first is the pedal. The pedal acts like a piano pedal. It sustains the sound. If I don't use the pedal,
It's vibraphone, by the way.
with the pedal, you can sustain the notes. You can use 2 hands or 4 hands occasionally.
Pretty cool, huh? Okay, he does a lot of stuff, so I'm just going to go ahead and skip to the next one, which is the xylophone. Very cool. Here's the xylophone. It's a wood-based instrument, as you can see. let's get to him playing it. Oops, I went too far. Here we go. Yeah. Marimba. It's kind of like a bigger xylophone, as you can see. It's a softer sound, as you can see. Pretty cool, huh? The glockenspiel. It's a metal instrument, as you can see. This is what they play Harry Potter on, if you know that theme. Fun. Okay. This is the, next is the bass drum. It's a pretty fun instrument. Yeah. There we go. You get the tam-tam. Gong-like. Such a good sound, isn't it? Oh, that came out so good. You could do so much more, but I'm just going to keep going. You could hit it, yeah. Here are snare drums. Those are all snare drums. With the, you can put the chain on it to make that sound. Cymbals. There we go. Some other cool effects. There you go. The triangle. These are the here, and the next one's a pretty cool one. There it goes. So cool. Tambourine. I think you're familiar with that. Anyway. Okay, so we'll end there. I know that was a little lengthy, but I wanted to make sure that you knew some of these instruments just in case you didn't. So yeah, those were some of the instruments that were presented there. So common instruments, the timpani are actually these big instruments right here. They're actually pretty cool things. I will talk about them. The xylophone, cymbal, triangle, snare drum, bass drum, tambourine, maracas. I actually have a maraca in my other room. If I were to think about this, I would have brought it over. But it's, of course, filled with, it could be filled with many things, you know, rice or beans, as, you know, some classic examples. But, you know, it's got some stuff inside to shake it. It's kind of like a baby rattle. Marimba, the piano, is actually a percussion instrument. We'll talk about that. Tubular bells, I'll show you a picture of that later, the gong, and the celeste, and I'll show you that later as well. Those are some really interesting percussion instruments. Once again, if you're really interested, you can find this video actually, especially if you're home right now. This is a great YouTube video. It's actually made for kids, but I like it because it's a great intro regardless of whether or not kids are watching it. I mean, like I said, I think it's a good video in general. And then I went down a rabbit hole of finding all sorts of different percussion instruments or cultures, and then it would take me hours because I feel like to honor like all the cultures, it would take so long. So I have a bunch of them here. Actually, I'll give you some bonus points if you know of any that I like to just have a big collection. When I went to you know, Disney World and we went to Epcot, they did a lot of drumming demonstrations. It was actually quite amazing. One of the ones I really liked was the Japan one. I thought that was just truly breathtaking. So definitely interested in seeing any other cultural type of videos. Okay, so now we're going to get into the physics of percussion instruments. So I'm not sure if you you know, recognize the fact that these instruments, especially percussion instruments, kind of have these characteristics of just sticking out, right? They don't actually sustain their tones unless they have those bars underneath. I don't know if you noticed all the marimbas and everything, but they had a big bar underneath it. That's the only way you can get them to sustain their note. And their purpose is to stand out. They don't blend like instruments in an orchestra. You know, orchestras that are played really nicely, it doesn't sound like one violin, 100 violins, it sounds like one. They blend. But if you hit one cymbal crash, that's not going to blend with those violins. It stands right out. One of the main things about, or characteristics about percussion instruments is that they're anharmonic. And they're called untuned. So untuned, and I have a slide on this. I noticed that these are slightly out, but I'll go to this really quickly. Untuned instruments don't have any pitch qualities to them. So for example, I'm looking on the right side. If you crash a cymbal, it doesn't play a note. It just sounds like noise. Or maracas. Or if you hit a snare drum, there's no tone to that whatsoever. But you do have some toned percussion instruments, like a xylophone has specific tone to it. And you saw that it's arranged very much like a piano, where it had the sharps and the flats, and they had the big keys and the small keys. The small keys are the sharps and the flats, and the big keys that play the major tones. Timpani actually can be tuned. One of the most famous pieces I love playing is oh my gosh, I can't forget. It's the theme for 2001 Space Odyssey of Strauss. It's a Strauss piece. I can't remember the name, and this is killing me. But it's a dun 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 dun. So that's a very famous timpani piece that that was made for the timpani. And then the piano is actually a tuned instrument. I think you all know that each key has its own specific tone to it. And it is, in fact, a percussion. When you play the piano, there's a bunch of strings in the back, and that's what you hit for percussion. So coming back to this concept, so percussion, untuned percussion. So again, this is referring to the snare drum, the cymbal, the maraca, etc., like that, are anharmonic, which means that they just don't have that nice tonality of instruments in piano of having harmonics that are present. So, for example, if you look on the left side, we have a harmonic instrument. We have intervals. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stand for the harmonic series, like the harmonic series of a string. We have standing wave 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And they're all present. They just all sound, they all have different amplitudes. So, you know, the 13th harmonic that's present is really soft compared to the first. If you look at the anharmonic, you notice that if this is the fundamental frequency, as in for standing waves, the next one should be at 2, but it's not. Notice this dotted line represents where it should be. This is the second harmonic, this is the third harmonic, this is the fourth harmonic, and notice they don't lie on those lines like over here. They lie away from those dotted lines, and because of that, they're called anharmonic. The frequencies do not give out integer multiples of the fundamental. So in other words, to play the next toned part, it has to be 2.23 times the fundamental frequency. And notice the next one's 3.73. So there's no mathematical, you know, I can't predict the next one. The next one doesn't follow the pattern. That's what it means. So those are anharmonic instruments, and those are our untuned instruments. So how do you make noise into sound, right? How do we make these timpani sound like something? Well, it turns out we have to modify the instrument to make it appear it has harmonics, or activate modes of vibration, which is just a really big word for standing waves. So let's go ahead and talk about standing waves. So this is Physics Girl. She does a really good job of explaining some concepts. I just discovered her, so I'm a little sad that it's been a while since I was able to find her. Oops, sorry about that. I want the YouTube video, which is in the comments. We're going to watch this together. This is what we would do in class anyway. It's a short video, but I think she does a really good job of explaining this.
So I have a team based all over the world.
So let's go ahead and skip the ad for now. There we go.
Hi there. Did you want to create some cool physics art without having to do
So this is also a fun demonstration I like to do in class. So she's just going to have to just take all the credit for it. But she's hooking up a function generator. I'm going to back up too. I'm just going to say she uses the word resonant modes. Think of it as harmonics as I teach it in class. I'm actually going to shut my door really quick because I want to play this. This is a good... harmonics. Pretty sick. It's awesome. It's really cool. Held together by sound waves. Isn't that amazing? So this is like a snare drum. And we're going to talk about these. So these are all standing waves on a circle. But now this is a violin, and you can see you can create standing waves on a violin, which is actually another really cool feature that you can get from this. Very cool. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this and stop. I'm literally going to exit out of this because otherwise it gets all mad. Okay. So I know that was a quick little video. It's something I would show in class anyway, like I said. But I think this actually, I love her explanation of standing waves, how you're able to see the two interfering waves creating those nodes and antinodes. And again, she uses the word resonant modes. That's a completely correct term. I just changed the term to harmonics. It's just another way to explain the same kind of concept here. But most importantly, you get standing waves in solids. So in other words, instead of just having a single line for a string or an air column for a pipe, you can actually get standing waves on like tables, for example, or more practically for drum heads. So if you look at the left, there's very cool standing wave patterns that are generated on a square plate. So we're not going to go into the mathematics of this. Like I said, it uses Bessel functions and integrals, and it just gets really crazy really quickly. But you can model them mathematically, so just know that you can if you're interested. And actually what changes the shapes of these patterns is actually the geometry itself. So in other words, square plates will make different patterns than circle plates, and then different patterns than violin plates. So I think that, of course, makes sense. But remember that there are waves on here. It doesn't seem like it, but the plate itself is like bending up and down when these things are generated. And those lines that you see are nodes. Those are places where the bending, there's no bending or up and down. It's a place where the salt or sand, whatever they use, is collected, which means all around it, the waves are moving a lot. So I'll show you a slow-mo video, too, of a standing wave on a cymbal. It's really incredible to see a cymbal move like jello, because you think of something very hard like a cymbal not move at all, but it does. So there you have it. So we're going to talk about drum heads specifically, as this is the physics of music class. I'm just going to show you some drum head modes, they're called. So same thing, harmonics. I'm not going to go into great detail about memorizing them or, what do they mean. I know in your homework I'm going to ask you some questions that I expect you to use your slides for, like which drum mode is this, scenario, all that fun stuff. But like I said, I'm not going to have you memorize these things in terms of testing. And here they are. So just some things I want you to notice about this. So this is all the vibrational modes of a drum head. So if I were to allow it to just create some standing waves, the fundamental is F1 is the fundamental, the lowest frequency. But if I turn that function generator up at 1.59 times the first frequency, I get the first nodal line. That dotted line is the node, the place where the wave doesn't move. So that means in the middle at 1-1 right there, is that the ends flap up and down and the middle stays the same. So that would be kind of like this. I can't really make it stay. Imagine the middle not moving and the end moving back and forth. It does that. Did a wonderful job with this. I think it's like that. Anyway, you get the idea. I did a terrible job. And then so forth. So of course these numbers mean things. I don't really care too much about the numbers, but if you notice the pattern, the O's stand for circles. Notice that O's are the circles, right? There's the O right there. And then the 1s stand for lines, depending on where the circle is and all that stuff. So again, I'm not too concerned about that. What I do want you to recognize is that you do make circles and lines, right? And it turns out when you have snare drums, you want circles for the best tonality of your snare drum strike, and you want lines actually for timpanis. And that's my next point right here. So turns out that when you strike a drum head, most of you know without any musical experience that you strike it right in the center. And for most things, that is correct. You want to excite those modes. You want to excite the fundamental or the second or the third. You're going to get some really good tonality with that, with minimal air dampening effects. So in other words, again, a good tone quality. With the timpani, you actually have to strike away from the center. So you want to strike near the edge of it. So if you ever have to strike a timpani, please don't hit it in the middle of the timpani. If you ever get such an opportunity, you should absolutely take it because it's really fun. But you do want to actually strike it right here because what we want to do is make sure that they're near the nodal lines of the vibrations, and we're not exciting too many excitations. We want very specific ones. So fun fact, this is the only drum that you really want to strike, not in the middle. So just to show you the dark lines or the nodal lines, so this is a place where the waves are not moving. So someone actually did the same experiment with this drum head, and you could see the really cool effects of the plates. I spelled this wrong, and I know it, so I'm going to fix it. Chladni plates are another, if you Google Chladni plates, there are hundreds of demos online that show you them. They're really cool to see. It's a fun little lab that I like to do too as well when it comes down to this. But once again, these are just some 2D standing waves that are practical for music. And this is just the timpani preferred tones. So, so fun fact, drums can actually, they don't actually have a tone to them, but you can make them sound differently. They can be tuned, it's called. For a snare drum, you have what is called a drum key. So, I actually have some YouTube videos. You notice that I'm pretty famous with the YouTube videos here.
Hi, I'm Gaston back here with the snare drum now. The snare drum is the best drum I can for us. It's so complicated. It's so complicated. And also,
Okay. So, as you can see, there we go, sorry. So he's demonstrating the tone of the snare drum right here, and he's using that thing that I showed you called the key, and what he's doing with the key is he's tightening it, just like you tighten the guitar string, you can tighten the drum head. Did you notice the tone difference? It's very hard to catch. If you want to do some ear training, you should definitely try it out because it's actually pretty cool. But you can see that he was listening to each side of the drum to hear what it sounds like, to hopefully have an even sounding tone when you strike it. And he was doing the corners to make sure it was all at the same tightness. So it's a very, very clever way to do that. The timpani actually has a foot pedal. It's different. So here's the timpani. He's taking it off and cleaning it. There we go. There's the drum tuners. Pretty cool. You know, it's got that like cartoon effect, right? There you go. Very quick clips, as you can see, of showing you these things. So I think audio examples are just really helpful for this stuff. So yes, you can tune drums. You can make them sound different. So my husband plays drums, and he actually likes his snare drum a certain way. So before any, shows that we do, if he has the time to do it, sometimes we're just really busy, but given the time, he'll go ahead and like turn, make his, tune his drum to make sure it has that nice crisp sound to it. Of course, not only does the drum head itself vibrate, but as you might imagine, the air inside actually oscillates as well. And it has, modes where it's compression going like this and side to side. So that three-dimensional wave that we saw earlier, that actually happens as well. And the cavity changes how the sound interacts as well, as you might imagine. So you can mathematically model this and get certain frequencies and certain tonalities out of this. We're not going to focus on this, so again, you're not going to do any calculations. But I do just want you to be very, aware of the fact that the drum strike can actually change depending on where you strike it, whether it's toward the rim or the center. If you strike it toward the rim, it will get higher because it's more taut toward the rim where it's actually connected, and it gets a little softer toward the center because it has more chances to vibrate. And the way you strike the drum actually changes. You can kind of mentally think about this, like if I go so they actually sound a little different depending on how hard you strike. And of course, the density of the material, the diameter of the drum, and the tension of the drum all contribute to how the drum sounds. Once again, we're not going to mathematically, talk about it, but it can be, measured here. My face is in the way. Okay, yeah. So as you might imagine, D is on the bottom, so the bigger the diameter, the lower the frequency. So bass drums are low. The higher the tension, the higher the frequency, and the more dense the material, the lower the frequency. So this is the Chladni plates for violins. You saw it in that video as well. And here there's some examples of somebody doing the standing wave experiment by taking a frequency generator and allowing for vibrations to go through the instrument. And you can see all different frequencies being highlighted here. So fun fact, 426 is close to the A, so 440. So that's why I think if you may have mentioned that you play violin, but if you don't, if you play violin, there are just some notes that just sound really good on the violin. And A is one of those notes, and D is one of those notes. D is about 288, so it's in between these two. So it's interesting that none of these, as I look at them, are any specific notes, like piano notes. But those are the frequency modes that create these nice resonance patterns on that violin. So at this point, I'm going to shift gears and talk about another set, instead of drum heads, of vibrating objects called vibrating bars. So you saw all of these in that video, but also mentioning the celeste. The celeste looks like a piano, but actually these are all hammers on top hitting a bar that's metal. The celeste, again, is another instrument, and I think of Harry Potter, that dun 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 dun. If you play on a celeste, if you think about it in your head, it's exactly that tone. It's that very high-pitched kind of tone sound. And tubular bells are kind of like, I hate to use the word bell, but it's not really tone, but it's got that if you think of church bells, or if you ever hear, I know at Quinnipiac they play the bells, and although you can hear the sound, it's not like a perfect tone. Or if you go to church, they'll play the bell, dong, dong, dong. Or they try to play Carol the Bells, dong, 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 dong. But it's like that bell nature to it. But you have a symphony or orchestra bell set, so you can get that nice church kind of sound, that bell sound when you need it in an orchestraic piece. A couple years ago at Southern, we played a really amazing piece that featured the tubular bells, which was just really, really cool. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but if I do, I'll put it in the comments so you can listen to it if you're interested. So once again, vibrations on a bar are very complicated, so I'm not going to go through the mathematics of it once again. But as you can see, when you strike a vibrational bar, the bar doesn't actually sit there as it looks like. It actually goes through bending up and down kind of like this. So it's a pretty rigid, it's not as rigid as you think when it comes down to it. And the bar is usually attached right in those spots that are at nodes. Of course, you want that. You want the vibrations to send out because the more vibration, the better the sound. So that's why bars are actually, if you notice, they're not like strapped in any specific spot. They are strapped in a perfect length measurement to get maximum vibration, right? You never think about these things. I never did. And of course, there's some more physics involved with it. So the bar undergoes two types of forces as it goes through. Compression is when you take two forces and they push together like this. Concrete is very good at compression. That's why if you notice things like buildings, like car garages, are all made out of concrete because they're really good at being pushed down. Concrete is not good at being pulled apart. In fact, it's very, very weak when it comes to that. But cables are good at that, right? Cables are really good at being pulled apart. If you think of bridge cables and ropes, ropes are not really good at being compressed. So if you want a really good structure, here's some structural physics for you. You want both. If you want like a building, they have concrete for compression, and they'll put rebarb in there or cable for tension, so it's really strong. So it has both components to stay in the spot that it needs to stay in. So as you might imagine, that's really helpful for those things. So as the bar moves up, the top of it goes through. This is the bar, this is tension, and the bottom's compression, but then it bends the other way and it does compression and then tension. So back and forth. So they can be stressed quite a bit. And like I said, it's just interesting that these things are not as rigid as you think. I'm pretty sure that this website is no longer. I'm going to humor us right now. Ooh, maybe? Oh, it works. It's getting old though. Been using this for quite some time now. But here's a free bar setup, and notice the node is right there. So that's where you want to set up your bar so that the node works. I think I could strike it, right? Yeah, there it goes. It's weird, it's so clear. I don't want to stop it. Phases, speed. And then you could do all sorts of fun experiments with this. You can hinge the bar. You could have a string. There it is. Nicely pinned right there. But our bar looks like that when you strike it. Pretty cool. But if I have the bar hinged, so it's attached to one end, it's a slightly different sound to it. And it works differently. So anyway, you can play with this all day. There's all sorts of things you can change about it. The bass frequency. But anyway, the point is that these things do bend, undergo tension and compression. And you can get different modes. So in other words, just like strings, you can get different harmonics you can excite, just depending on how, what frequency you can reach with that. But usually you play with the fundamental, which is this number one right here that you see in this video. So if you notice another things you never think about, right? So here's another thing that's really interesting about the vibrational bar shape is that the inside's actually carved out. It's not just this big thing of wood. Well, what happens is because of the shape of it, it actually allows for the energy to travel more freely with a thing called impedance matching. So there's, the in and the out come back and forth, so you get this feedback loop. Well, this maximizes that feedback and, has what is called impedance matching. So we're not going to go into impedance, and that's a whole nother course again. So just know that the shape of it is very specific and scientifically engineered to get the best tone quality that you can get out of that. And same thing, they're mostly anharmonic. So notice that the next couple modes are not really mathematically related. 2.5, 5, almost 10, almost 15. So they're still anharmonic, so that's why bars just don't sound as nice as a string. Like a guitar string is just perfectly toned, where a bar is nicely toned, but you don't you kind of feel like you're missing something when you listen to the xylophone or the marimba, but that's of course kind of the allure to those instruments. Comparing vibrating bars, yeah, we talked about, well, the video kind of talked about it, but the resonators are these tubes underneath which allow for sustained notes. If you don't have them, they'll sound more harsh. So the marimbas, glockenspiels can have resonators, as you saw, but if you don't have them, they have more of that harsh sound. So I say more harsh and more melodic. I mean, it's not so much that it's more melodic. I would say it just blends nicer when you have those vibrating bars. Here's those tubular bells. So again, anharmonic, if you notice. Another really interesting thing is that when you strike the bell, the tubular bell, and you were to take a microphone, just like we do in lab, and record some of these frequencies, you would find that there's no fundamental frequency. So the bass tone is missing, and it's actually called a phantom tone. It's really weird. And our brain puts it in our minds because they're like freaking out because they say, where is that missing tone? Where is it going to happen? Your brain says, no, I'll put it in there anyway. So it's, when you hear that strike, it's interesting. I don't know if I can find a tubular bell, because you probably, tubular bell. Unless you like actually listen to it, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. There's actually a song called Tubular Bells, which is like the Exorcist theme. Sure, let's see if this is the right one. Oh boy, here we go. I want it up. The fun thing is I need tubular bells instrument. Let's play the chimes with tubular bells.
Hello, I'm Gary Franz. This video is of tubular bells or chime to reproduce. At the top.
Yeah, it sounds like wind chimes. It's exactly what it is.
They're open at the bottom, but just sometimes they should be softer. This paddle is a little bit.
It's like a doorbell. Those are tubular bells.
Versus. You'll also notice about the way I'm striking. From here, freestanding, you stand, you watch it, and hold. And so you want to properly remove.
Okay, he's not doing it anymore. But the point is, it sounds like wind chimes. And again, that tone that you're hearing, that like main note is missing. So it has that like ambient effect to it. So like I said, tubular bells are just really interesting instruments, and you're missing that fundamental pitch. It's called phantom tone. You want to go down like, you know, some, I don't know, Wikipedia craziness, start Googling phantom tones. There's lots of other ones where your mind puts in tones where they don't exist. It's kind of cool. Cymbals, going on to cymbals now. Cymbals are edge-free. In other words, that they don't hang from the sides, they hang from the middle. And cymbals are actually quite the instrument. If you've ever gone to Sam Ash in Woodbridge, there's a store, it's a music store called Sam Ash, and there's a whole room that is soundproof dedicated to just cymbals, where you go in, you take a drumstick, and you listen to them. And you would think a piece of metal doesn't sound very different from another, and they do, depending on what you want. Now, there's all different cymbals. There's the ride, there's the hi-hat, there's the crash, there's the splash. I mean, I happen to know these terms because my husband's a drummer. I'm not a personal drummer. And they do have different tone qualities, and where you strike them are different. It's really interesting to hear that. There's no harmonics whatsoever, so it just sounds like a bunch of noise. But you get higher and lower noise, so you can hear or so depending on the size of the cymbal that you have. So exactly what I was just saying, you get lower tones with bigger cymbals, and not all cymbals are created equal. One of those puppies are probably about $300, so they're very expensive. Actually, I'm surprised I don't have Zildjian on here, which is a very popular brand of cymbal that is made. But you know, when you buy cymbals, usually better, thicker metals, the better quality, because it sustains that 2D wave better. So I want to show you that video, like I said, of the slow motion cymbal, because it's really incredible to see it. Hopefully this, yeah, see, oh yeah, this is it. I'm gonna actually copy this into the slides. Here we go, ready? You can watch the standing wave happen on the cymbal, which is just really cool. Look at that. You can see all the waves interacting with one another, and they purposely put, like, I don't know, something on it so you can see that it is moving. But you could see the standing waves on that. It's incredible. And the type of modes that is going on with that is very cool. They actually do a, let me just copy this into here with some, they do the snare drum. I think here's a snare drum slow motion too, which is really a good video. So there it is, that slow motion effect that you see of a standing wave on a snare drum. Very cool. I'm gonna actually, I think what I'm gonna do is put this one here too. Just pardon me as I fix these things live. So I do like both of them, and you could watch them or show somebody of them because they're just really cool things to see. I know it's a bummer that I don't get to be there in class because I like doing all this in class naturally. Naturally, you do too. But anyway, we'll save that one too. Okay, where are we now? I think we're on our last bit. Last part of today's lesson. Okay, so this percussion instrument, right? So I was like, what, percussion? No, it is. It's actually percussion because what happens is it's actually a string instrument. So the story of the piano all comes back in the day. They had this instrument called the harpsichord. Now, the harpsichord, one of the, it's got that really old-timey sound to it. Let's go ahead and do the harpsichord. Harpsichord. Someone's got to play it for me. Harpsichord, very good. I just want you to hear it. I don't care about, there it is. Sounds more like a string instrument, right? So actually, so I'm going to do the history. This is the harpsichord video. I'm going to put this here. So, the story, I usually tell this in class, which is why I'm kind of doing this, because, you know, harpsichord. Harpsichord. I think that's how you spell history. Good, I spelled it right. So if you notice the harpsichord, and I'll even come back to that video, it sounds like plucking strings, and I hope you notice that if you see this video, there's 3 strings there, and when you take a hand, the piano key actually is a lever that comes down and hits it like a hammer. Notice that all the notes are the same volume, no matter what the person does. So they're all the same volume. So if you wanted to play like something really soft or something very like subtle or loud, you couldn't do it. But the piano was an engineering feat because Piano-Forte, if you know anything about Italian, piano means soft and forte means loud. The official name is this instrument can play both loud and soft. Because I'm sitting next to my instrument, I'm going to show you really quick. we go. Oh, there's the piano. And the interesting thing about the piano is that you can do that. You can play loud and soft. So, my kids were just playing it today. Gross. Nah, it's okay. I just gotta clean them every time they touch it. I never, ever tell my kids not to play with a piano. I'll let them. The only thing is I just don't like when they put their feet on there because I think it's a fun thing to do. Or obviously if they're eating like a peanut butter jelly, they can't touch the piano. But I let them go to town because that's how I get them to get interested. Or at least I hope. But anyway, enough about my kids. The piano. The piano is an instrument that can play all sorts of sounds. It's obviously, but I can play really soft. Soft and loud together at once, which is really just good for playing like don't judge me, I don't have the music. So anyway, so like all those things you can add, dynamics. So very cool. So Piano-Forte means soft and loud, and that's the engineering. Like I said, it's an engineering feat because people weren't able to actually make that with the harpsichord until this came along. So what you're seeing in this slide is two types of pianos. You see the upright right here. I'm sorry, the upright is the kind of piano that's right here. This is my piano right here, the upright piano. And then you have the grand piano. So I'll talk a little bit about those. So the piano has 88 keys. There they are. So you have lots of keys. They have pedals on the bottom here. So what you have is sustain. So I can play this note, no pedal. Pedal. I could play that was the right pedal, the middle pedal. So here's the middle pedal. Softer. And then the sostenuto muting. So it's another similar type of muting effect. As you can see, I'm not really playing anything. I'm just kind of riffing here. So the piano is under a lot of tension. In fact, when the piano tuner comes in, they have like really good abs because when they tighten the strings that are in here, it's a lot of strength. I think everyone knows that pianos weigh a lot. They're very heavy. Okay, a piano mover to move your piano. And one of the big things about the upright versus the grand piano, so the grand piano is just a faster piano is what happens. So this is really good. But the hammers are actually upright, and I'll show you a picture. So when I strike the keyboard, the hammer goes like this. And it strikes it just fine. When I have a grand piano, the hammer is this way instead. So when I strike it, gravity goes with me. So this goes way faster than this. Can you notice a difference? Not really. Can you feel a difference? Yeah, you can. It's really nice. Plus, the soundboard is just so much bigger, so you just get bigger amplification. It's just really, really nice. So this is a video of how crazy the mechanics are to allow you to play at different dynamics, meaning loud and softness. If you go to this website, let's go ahead. Once again, I'm not ever testing you on this, but I think it is worth the... Oh, we don't have flash here anymore. See, I told you some of my stuff is old. I'll just go to this one right here. There we go. So we're going to play the note. So the string is here. The key is here, and this hammer is going to strike the string. There we go. So release the note and repeat. So as you can see, the mechanics behind a piano, which is why they're expensive, is pretty substantial, right? When I was first teaching, I was like, what? Crazy. So this is my piano, and I actually took this picture while the piano tuner was tuning this, just so I could look at the inside of it. So what you see here is you see the smaller strings are over here, but the big low strings go all the way down to the back of the piano. There's a big board in the back to collect those sounds, just like a guitar, acoustic guitar has the big body, the piano has a body to resonate those sounds. And in fact, there's multiple strings in here. You can't really see it, but there's not one, but there's 3 strings, so you can actually hear it. This is the vertical or upright piano action. Notice that it's upright, like I said. So there's all these parts. I'm not going to even whip in. I mean, the jack, the back check, you know. So there's all these crazy things. Here's the key itself, but this is the mechanics that allow it to actually sound the way it does. It's pretty cool. And like I said, what you want to do is have multiple strings. It's also made out of steel, and they're under a tremendous amount of tension. And then there is the grand piano here, which is, if you look at this is the beautiful part, the soundboard, right? Both for the length of the strings and collecting the high and the low sounds. It's just bigger, more vibrant and beautiful. So if I ever win the lottery, that's my first thing. Actually, I don't have any room for a grand piano, but I will gladly get rid of my couch and just put that in my living room. We could sit on chairs or the floor, it's fine. When it comes down to that. So I'll end here on my piano anyway. So the piano is a pretty remarkable instrument if you think about it. It's actually percussion because you are pretty much hitting it. There's so much to the piano that I didn't go over, so unfortunately, to keep this under an hour, barely, I'm not going to go into any more details of the piano. But if you have any questions, you can send me questions. But overall, you could get standing waves on solid materials, so such as cymbals, drum heads, pianos, violins, all these interesting, crazy places. When we saw that slow motion video, you're able to see some of those waves that you normally don't get to see. Or on the Chladni plates, those are a really cool demonstration. And basically, percussion instruments are mostly anharmonic, meaning that they don't have any tone like the piano does. They have more of a crash cymbal kind of sound to them, and they make mostly noise. Now, you have some tuned instruments like the xylophone and the timpani and all those things that sort of have some tone to them, but they're definitely not going to have the tonality or the quality of tone like a stringed instrument or even the piano. This is definitely a tuned instrument when it comes down to that. So, and this is just a summary. I like this. You can read this on your own. I'm not going to read it. So the next video will be all about musical scale. So I'll do some piano demonstrations right here and show you some more things about the piano. I'll talk about the scales. Why does this sound good? Or it has that distinct sound to it. Versus like a minor scale. I just like playing the piano. I'm just getting an excuse to do that. So I'll do that in the next video and talk all about the musical scale. Thank you.